Hello everyone, welcome to the next part of heart, that is internal structure. When we study about the internal structure of heart, तो basic question arise होता है सबके मन में कि internal structure of heart में क्या structures आने चाहिए, क्या points हम लिख सकते हैं. So to clear that doubt, let us see what we can write in about the external structure of heart. External structure of heart में हम सबसे पहली बात तो mention करेंगे atrium के बारे में and second ventricles के बारे में. This is the first part. After that इनके division के बारे में, इनके division यानी right atrium और left atrium. Next ventricles के division के बारे में, right ventricle and left ventricle. Once we complete about the division, उसके बाद right atrium, left atrium कैसे divided है, left ventricle, right ventricle कैसे divided है, उनमें क्या openings होते हैं, किसके through वो connected होते हैं, we will be studying all that things step by step. So let's start with the basic diagram of the heart. This structure is right atrium, this part is left atrium, this part is right ventricle and this part is left ventricle. Now first we will study about the atrium. When we mention atrium, so this two part is the atrium part. Now this complete whole part is atrium. Still it is not differentiated into right part or left part. So atrium is basically divided into right atrium and left atrium by the help of a structure or a septum which is known as Interventricular septum. Septum means a layer or a partition which divides a complete whole part into two parts. So when we draw this line over here, this layer is known as IAS, interatrial septum. Interatrial septum is that partition which divides the ventricle into two parts, right atrium and left atrium. Next, right ventricle and left ventricle is divided externally into two parts by interventricular groove, but internally or anteriorly, the right ventricle and left ventricle, this two partition is being formed by a structure or a partition which is known as IVS. And what does IVS denote? Interventricular septum. It means the ventricles which is divided into right and left part, it is by the structure or a septum which is known as IVS, that is interventricular septum. Partitions completed. One more important thing that we have to keep in mind about the walls. The walls of the atrium are thin. When we say that the walls of atrium are thin, तो कैसे thin होते हैं? इनका जब comparison किया जाता है with ventricles, so comparatively atrium के जो walls होते हैं वो thin होते हैं as compared to ventricles. Now reason why? Because when we will be studying the structure of, जब हम देखते हैं structure of heart का, तो ये एट्रियम है, ये एट्रियम है. एट्रियम को क्या करना रहता है? ब्लड को नीचे की तरफ पंप करना रहता है. That's it the function of atrium. और जब कोई भी चीज नीचे की तरफ पंप करता है तो वहां पे जो फोर्स एक्ट करता है वो ग्रेविटेशनल फोर्स या फिर ग्रेविटी एक्ट करता है. तो यहाँ पे राइट एट्रियम और लेफ्ट एट्रियम जो भी ब्लड पंप करेंगे वो अलोंग दी ग्रेविटी पंप करेंगे, इसलिए उन्हें ज्यादा फोर्स लगाने का जरूरत नहीं पड़ता है. एंड सेकेंड पार्ट, when the right ventricle and left ventricle comes, right ventricle और left ventricle को blood upward move करना पड़ता है या फिर upward pump करना पड़ता है, यानी against the gravity. Hence to support that, ventricles के जो wall होने चाहिए naturally thicker होने चाहिए ताकि ज़्यादा वो pressure apply कर सके heart के ventricles में जो wall है उसको upward transport करने के लिए. This is the basic reason why the walls of of atrium is thin as compared to ventricles. And when we will be mentioning about the walls of ventricle, the walls of ventricles are thick as compared to atrium. Now the openings. Right atrium is connected to right ventricle, left atrium is connected to left ventricle by wall. Right atrium is connected with right ventricle, left atrium is connected with left ventricle by an opening, and this opening is known as right interventricular aperture. In short, we can write it as right interventricular aperture. The same, this opening, instead of right, we will be mentioning over here is left interventricular aperture. This L denote left. So the right atrium is connected with the right ventricle, left atrium is connected with the left ventricle with the help of an opening which is known as right interatrioventricular aperture. An opening which is present that connects the left atrium to the left ventricle, it is known as left atriointerventricular aperture. Now, this opening is being guarded by a valve. In the right part of heart, this opening is guarded by a valve, and same in left it is guarded by a valve. In right atrium, this valve is known as tricuspid valve, and in left part this valve is known as bicuspid valve. Here the bi represents 2 and tri represents 3. Now these valves are flap-like structures which closes the opening which connects the right to the left part. Why this valve is necessary? Because when the right atrium and left atrium pumps the blood down to the right ventricle and left ventricle, the blood should not flow upwards back. To prevent that upward flow of blood, valves are very much necessary. That prevents the upward flow of blood via the circulation process. So this is the basic function of tricuspid valve and bicuspid valve. Next, there is an opening of greater blood vessel superior vena cava inside the right atrium. There is the opening of inferior vena cava inside the right atrium. So this opening of inferior vena cava is guarded by a valve, and this valve is known as Eustachian valve. Now this structure which divides heart into into atrium and ventricle is known as coronary sulcus. So from the coronary sulcus, a veins or a blood vessels arise into the right atrium, and this is known as coronary sinus. So when the coronary sinus, that is a blood vessel of its heart's blood vessel, when it opens into the right atrium, it is also guarded by a valve which is known as Thebasian valve. So this point is very much important according to the perspective of CET and NET. The valve which is present in front of inferior vena cava is known as Eustachian valve. The valve which is present in front of coronary sinus is known as Thebasian valve. It is mostly asked in the MCQs or answered in one sentence. Now why this valve is present? Again the same answer, same reason, to prevent the backward flow of blood via the process of circulation. Once after this valve, we will be studying about the walls of the ventricle. Now this part is the wall of ventricle. Internally, the wall of ventricles have two types of muscles, a smaller muscle and upward muscle. Internally, the wall of ventricle have two types of muscles, that is a small muscle and a larger muscle. Now as you can see from this structure, this is the smaller muscle which is known as column cornae, and the bigger muscles are known as papillary muscles. The same, the smaller muscles are known as column cordae and the bigger muscles are known as papillary muscles. Now, from these muscles, an extensions arises. In both the part of ventricles, the extensions like muscles arises. These extensions like muscles are known as chordae tendineae. What is known as chordae tendineae? Now, what is the function of this? Consider these fingers as chordae tendineae, which are connected to the tricuspid valve inside the right part and bicuspid valve inside the left part. So, consider these fingers as called chordae tendineae inside the right part and this chordae tendineae inside the left part. And this chordae tendineae are connected to the tricuspid valve and this one is connected to the bicuspid valve. When this both chordae tendineae will contract, it will open the valves, that is tricuspid valve and bicuspid valve. Due to opening of this tricuspid and bicuspid valve, the blood which is filled in right atrium and left atrium will come inside the right ventricle and left ventricle. Once the blood comes inside the right ventricle and left ventricle, the contracted chordae tendineae will again relax. Due to the relaxation, the tricuspid valve and the bicuspid valve will again close up. So, the main function of chordae tendineae, papillary muscles and column cordae is to open the tricuspid valve and bicuspid valve, due to which the blood filled in right atrium and left atrium comes down in the right ventricle and left ventricle. After that, the two arteries, which one comes out from the right ventricle and one comes from the left ventricle. This which comes out of the right ventricle and this artery which comes out of the left ventricle. Now, the opening of this artery is basically known as pulmonary artery or we can say as pulmonary aorta. और ये जो आर्टरी होता है इसे हम कहते हैं सिस्टमिक आर्टरी या फिर हम इसे कह सकते हैं सिस्टमिक आवर्टा. दिस इज द बिगेस्ट आर्टरी इनसाइड आवर बॉडी. इसका काम होता है डीऑक्सीजनेटेड ब्लड को सप्लाई करना लंग्स फॉर द प्रोसेस ऑफ ऑक्सीजनेशन. नाउ लेट अस स्टडी हाउ दिस प्रोसेस वर्क्स. सुपीरियर वेन कावा, इंफीरियर वेन कावा. सुपीरियर वेन कावा और इंफीरियर वेन कावा के थ्रू राइट एट्रियम में आपका डीऑक्सीजनेटेड ब्लड आया, तो राइट एट्रियम क्या होता है आपका डीऑक्सीजनेटेड ब्लड से फिल्ड अप हो जाता है. बिफोर दिस ओपनिंग of this pulmonary aorta and systemic aorta is guarded by a valve-like structure. Both these openings have a similar type of valves which are semi-lunar valves. Now these valves also have the same function to prevent the backflow of blood. When the superior vein cava, inferior vein cava and coronary sinus brings deoxygenated blood inside the right atrium, राइट एट्रियम क्या करेगा? कॉन्ट्रैक्ट करेगा. राइट एट्रियम के कॉन्ट्रैक्ट करने के वजह से जो ब्लड फिल्ड होगा आपके राइट एट्रियम में, जिसे हम कहते हैं डीऑक्सीजनेटेड ब्लड, विल बी गेटिंग मूविंग इनटू द राइट वेंट्रिकल. राइट वेंट्रिकल फिल्ड अप हो जाएगा कौन से ब्लड से? डीऑक्सीजनेटेड ब्लड से. जब राइट वेंट्रिकल आपका कॉन्ट्रैक्ट करेगा तो इसमें का डीऑक्सीजनेटेड ब्लड वो मूव कर जाएगा किसमें? आपके पल्मोनरी आवर्टा में. तो जब ये डीऑक्सीजनेटेड मूव कर जाएगा आपके पल्मोनरी आवर्टा में, तो पल्मोनरी आवर्टा से कहां जाएगा? ये लंग्स के लिए. कौन से प्रोसेस के लिए? ऑक्सीजनेशन के लिए. एक बार ऑक्सीजनेशन हो गया उस ब्लड का तो वो कन्वर्ट हो जाएगा आपका ऑक्सीजनेटेड ब्लड में. और ये ऑक्सीजनेटेड ब्लड एंटर करेगा आपके हार्ट के लेफ्ट एट्रियम में वाया हेल्प ऑफ ए ब्लड वेसल, जिसे हम कहते हैं पल्मोनरी वेन्स. और एक बार ये पल्मोनरी वेन्स के थ्रू ऑक्सीजनेटेड ब्लड आपके लेफ्ट एट्रियम में आ गए तो आपका लेफ्ट एट्रियम क्या होगा? फिल्ड अप हो जाएगा ऑक्सीजनेटेड ब्लड से. सो व्हेन दिस लेफ्ट एट्रियम विल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, this oxygenated blood will move inside the left ventricle, and this left ventricle will be filled up with oxygenated blood. When this left ventricle will contract, जब left ventricle contract करेगा तो ये जो oxygenated blood है वो मूव कर जाएगा आपका सिस्टमिक आर्टरी में, और एक बार ब्लड आपका ऑक्सीजनेटेड ब्लड लेफ्ट वेंट्रिकल से सिस्टमिक आर्टरी में मूव हो गया तो ये सिस्टमिक आर्टरी इन ऑक्सीजनेटेड ब्लड को लेके जाएगा आपके बॉडी के टिश्यूज और सेल्स के पास. सो इन दिस प्रोसेस और इन दिस वे you can explain the external and internal structure of heart. External और internal structure of heart में जब भी स्टूडेंट्स को कंफ्यूजन होता है तो उनको सबसे पहले ये डिफाइन करना चाहिए कि एक्सटर्नल स्ट्रक्चर में क्या पार्ट्स आएंगे और इंटरनल स्ट्रक्चर में क्या पार्ट्स आएंगे. एक्सटर्नल स्ट्रक्चर में हम लोग को किस पार्ट्स के बारे में क्या बताना है, एंड इंटरनल स्ट्रक्चर में हमको किन पार्ट्स के बारे में क्या बताना है. ब्रीफली अगर आप इंटरनल स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ हार्ट के बारे में बताने जाओगे तो आप एट्रियम, वेंट्रिकल्स दोनों के वॉल्स के थिकनेस के बारे में, क्यों थिकनेस क्या होता है, उनमें जो ब्लड वेसल्स ओपन होते हैं उन ब्लड वेसल्स के बारे में, ब्लड वेसल्स में जो वाल्व्स होता है उनके बारे में, एट्रियम और वेंट्रिकल्स कौन से ओपनिंग से कनेक्टेड होते हैं उनके बारे में, ओपनिंग्स के ऊपर कौन से वाल्व्स होते हैं उनके बारे में, सिस्टमिक आउटा, पल्मोनरी आउटा के ऊपर जो वाल्व्स होते हैं उनके बारे में, ब्लड कैसे फिल्ड अप होता है, पल्मोनरी वेन्स का क्या होता है. अबाउट ऑल दिस थिंग यू हैव टू come into the internal structure of heart. So yeah, this was all about the external and internal structure of heart. Hope you all have understood. If you have understood all the content, please do like, share and subscribe my channel, and please do watch the complete video for more informative content. So keep watching and keep subscribing. Thank you so much.